So it's Friday, and that means it's time for another Medics Money podcast on call, where we talk about interesting things that have happened during the week or recently. And today I want to talk about something that happened when we did a talk at that's your cat, mate.
Oh, yep. Dante's appeared to give his specialist opinion.
That cat knows a lot about finances because he's here for a lot. And he hasn't been around for ages. And then just as I hit record, he turns up.
Yeah.
Gotta love cats.
He knows one too.
Where was I? Okay. So we got invited to do a talk at a local medical committee recently. There was a scary number of people there, but it was great, about pensions. And of course, as pensions is a multidisciplinary team, so you need an accountant and a specialist IFA. So Ed was there, and one of our specialist IFAs, Nigel, came there as well. And during the talk, the IFA went into the various tax charges associated with the pension, so annual allowance, lifetime allowance, etc. And then, Ed, you mentioned something about economics afterwards that I thought was really interesting. And we're about to find out whether the Medics Money podcast listeners find it interesting, because you're going to tell us a bit about Adam Smith, the father of economics, and how that relates to fair taxation in the NHS pension scheme. And you're going to do all of that. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that Ed's doing all of that despite being harassed by his cat.
Yes, so my cat Dante is not helpful right now. But yeah, so we had, as Tommy said, we had this talk, and it just came into my mind from that I was taught when I did my economics degree. A lot of our listeners, viewers will know that, as I mentioned many times before, but before I went to medical school, I worked as an accountant. And prior to that, my first degree was in economics. And as part of that, there was a discussion about the principles that about what makes a good tax. Okay, so if you're going to create a new tax, what would make a good tax? And the principles were first formulated by Adam Smith. He's known as the father of economics in his very famous book, Wealth of Nations, which came out in 1776. And he postulated 4 principles. So Adam Smith thought that if any government created a new tax, that any tax should be fair, convenient, efficient, and certain. And it was that last principle that came into my mind while listening to this talk on the NHS pension, because of the vast amount of uncertainty amongst doctors as to how much they're going to be affected by. So the annual allowance charge, gathering pension records have been an issue, and so on. But I just thought it might be quite interesting to go through those principles in turn and apply them to the NHS pension scheme with Tommy's help. If we talk about the first principle that Adam Smith postulated, so that would be fairness. And that relates to the idea that the payment of the tax should be in proportion to the ability to pay, which in some ways is fair enough. But of course, with the NHS pension, there is a bit more kind of nuance to that.
Yeah, I'm slightly nervous about debating economics degree from an average university and a trained accountant. Me, absolutely no financial training, self-taught, but I'm going to have a go anyway, because we just talked about this and you were like, well, the first principle seems okay, that the tax should be in proportion to the ability to pay. And in general, it is. But the point that I wanted to raise, and I don't know what the audience thinks about that, that's what the YouTube comments section is for. I love that section of our YouTube. It is in proportion, but it isn't really, because you're paying tax now while you're working on the benefit, the pension, that you will receive later. And I think this is actually the nub of the problem for a lot of people. In general, when you pay more tax, it's because you're receiving more benefit. And that is, of course, what the first principle seems to be saying here, unless I misinterpreted. Your cat is now looking really...
It's putting the pressure on me. You've got to get this right.
Oh no, I'm really fumbling my words already. Just hear me out, Dante. I've got this. So you're paying tax now on a benefit that you may receive later. And I'm saying may, because obviously, if you unfortunately die, then you're not going to realise the full benefit of your NHS pension. So you thought it was fair enough. I'm going to counter that, and I'm scared because Dante's looking at me really angry now.
Yeah, you'll be the deciding vote. But no, I totally get what you mean. It's, you're not receiving that money, but you still have to pay a tax charge on it as well. That some people say is pretty unfair. Absolutely. Fair enough. Okay. The second principle that Adam Smith postulated was something called efficiency, which in this context basically means that any new tax or any tax should minimize distortions and disincentives. What do you think about that, Tommy, in terms of the NHS pension and minimizing disincentives?
I think we could go to town on this one. Yeah, I think distortions and disincentives. So in general, taxation policy should drive your behavior. Okay, that's part of what tax is about, isn't it? Taxation, changes in taxation policy should drive your behavior. as I'm sure listeners of this podcast know, there is a scenario for doctors and other NHS staff who are similarly affected by this, where you can do extra work, okay, often very difficult and tiring work, propping up the NHS and helping patients, and receive a pensions tax bill, which is a distortion and is a disincentive. So I think it definitely hits this. What do you think, mate? What does Dante think?
I think Dante's going to keep his cards close to his chest. But absolutely, it's been all over the papers, hasn't it? The idea that there are doctors who aren't doing those extra shifts because they're going to face these pension charges. And I believe our esteemed new Chancellor, Jeremy, has said in the past that that should be changed, I believe.
Wow. So if you listen to our budget podcast or watched it on YouTube, you would have seen 2 tweets from Jeremy when he was safe on the back benches in obscurity, saying that it is crazy not to fix the disincentives that exist because of the way the NHS pension is taxed. And then in his first outing as Chancellor, when he's in direct control of fiscal policy, crazy not to fix was a direct quote from him. What did he do? Tell us.
He did absolutely nothing about it at all.
Well,
in fact, he made it a little bit worse, to be honest.
If he did nothing, I might be all right with it. I wouldn't be surprised. But he actually made it worse. Listen to our budget podcast there. But essentially, in summary, decreasing the 45% tax band from 150 to 125, 140, your annual allowance charge is levied at your marginal rate, so you'll be paying even more. So he's made it worse for some people.
Thanks, Jeremy. Okay, the third principle from Adam Smith is what's called convenience. And that basically relates to the ease of compliance for the people paying the tax. So how simple is the process for paying the tax? How simple is the process for collecting the tax? It's obviously not particularly simple just doing the wretched pension forms. I'm going to throw that one out there first of all.
Yeah, I think, again, it fulfills the definition of and we're mainly talking about annual allowance tax here for record, not lifetime allowance or any of the others, just annual allowance specifically. So how simple is the process for collecting and paying the tax? I think regular listeners to this podcast will know that it is ridiculously complicated. And it's now got to the point where you probably need a specialist advisor. There are very few people that fully understand this. And of course, that's what Medic's Money about. We've got all the best advisors here, but it doesn't help, this. Yeah, I don't think it hits this criteria. It's a bad tax. I vote to get rid of it.
Yeah.
All those in favour say aye.
Yeah, I thought those in favour as well.
I think he said meow.
He did meow
loudly.
But finally, and this is the principle that, as I say, just got me suddenly thinking whilst I was sat there listening to Nigel at this talk, just how bad the NHS pension charges are. The final principle is certainty. That means that taxpayers should be clearly informed about why they're paying the tax, how the tax is levied, and also how much is due. And what I just remember witnessing in that talk, it's a great talk, but just this sheer sort of collective wail from every doctor in there about just trying to get any information about how much they're going to have to pay because of the pension records are incomplete, nobody's getting the right forms. It just seems a bit of a mess, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think exactly. There are doctors out there right now, because we know some of them, that they know that they have an annual allowance tax charge, yet NHS pensions have not got the data because it has not been passed through. And that is usually NHS payroll's fault, or if you're a GP, it's PCSE's fault. So PCSE haven't passed the data through. NHS pensions have no idea that you have a problem, therefore do not send you one of the dreaded bound envelopes informing you that you may or may not have a tax charge. And unless you happen to listen to this podcast and have an expert financial advisor who helps you, you would not know. There are people listening to this podcast right now who have 5 or 6 figure annual allowance tax charges who have absolutely no idea about that charge through absolutely no fault of their own and purely at the fault of the system.
So much for certainty. As we said at the start, guys, this genuinely was a comment I made at this LMC talk that we're listening to. It suddenly came into my head and we thought we'd just share that with you. And it may seem that we are being very down on the NHS pension. Well, what we're being down on is basically the annual allowance charge that comes from it and the problems that that causes for everyone. But that's not to say we're trying to be down overall on the NHS pension itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we always say this, for the vast majority of us, NHS pension is still a great deal, but the taxation around it has become Byzantine in its complexity. As I said, you probably need a specialist medical accountant working in partnership with a specialist independent advisor like those we have on Medic's Money to help you understand that. And if you need that to understand a tax, that is not good taxation, according to Adam Smith. So Adam Smith wants to tell Jeremy, sort this out like you said you would when you're on the backbenches. Please. And Dante is looking very active. He agrees.
Dante agrees. He's saying, get a move on Jeremy, and that's what he's saying.
Maybe, what's the number 10's cat called? Because if Dante could speak to
It's Larry, I think.
Larry, and then Larry could speak to Jeremy.
Formal channels.
Yes. You've got to leverage everything we've got. All right, Dante, go find Larry.
Just give me a massive glare now.
Okay. So, yeah, hope that was helpful. Pretty obscure. Interesting debate. If you do invite us to talk to your LMC, we actually give out lots and lots of practical advice and don't go down geeky rabbit holes like this. But today we took the opportunity to go down a geeky.
That's what the Fridays are all about.
That's what Fridays are all about. Thank you so much for listening. If you're finding the Friday episodes useful, let us know. If you're not, also let us know. And the main episode's always on a Tuesday, on-call episodes on a Friday, as and when time commitments and cat commitments allow. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys. Nice work, Dante.